My friends, in our first reading today, God makes a solemn commitment, a covenant with Abraham and his descendants to be their God forever. God commands Abraham, "You and your descendants must keep my covenant throughout the ages." God even changes Abram's name to Abraham as a reflection of the covenant with the promise that he would be the father of a host of many nations. Sisters and brothers, I just wonder how Abraham must have felt with all of this. I'm sure that he probably felt just a little overwhelmed, a little confused and uncertain, but at the same time also honored, fulfilled, and overjoyed. The task of leading God's people and upholding the covenant throughout all ages is certainly no easy feat, but one that Abraham accepts willingly. In a sense, Abraham's response to God serves as an example for us so many years later. Likewise, Jesus made a covenant not just with the Jews, but with all of us. And that new covenant was sealed in his blood at the Last Supper. As Matthew's genealogy indicates, Abraham is the ancestor of Jesus, and in Jesus we find the complete fulfillment of the promises made long ago. Through Jesus, people everywhere become, in a special way, children of God. In this gospel account, Jesus is having a conversation with the Jews. He tells them that if they truly keep his word, they will never see death. Can you imagine how shocked everyone must have been at Jesus' words? Never see death. What was Jesus thinking? Naturally, the Jews thought Jesus was crazy. Jesus is saying, if you want to see God, here I am. What should have been a wonderful moment of revelation, if you will, goes horribly negative. Did Jesus actually think that he was greater than Abraham or the prophets? All of the prophets, great though they were, died. Why did Jesus think he was different? And when Jesus responds to the Jews, he doesn't respond to their criticism of him. Rather, Jesus talks about his Father. He tells them that his Father is the one who will glorify him. Then Jesus tells the Jews that his father Abraham had rejoiced to see his day. His listeners thought Jesus was off his rocker. Then the people asked, "Who do you make yourself out to be?" And the Pharisees retort by telling Jesus that he wasn't even 50 years old. How could he possibly have seen Abraham? And Jesus simply responds to them, "I tell you most solemnly, before Abraham ever came to be, I am." I am is a divine name revealed to Moses. In other words, Jesus is claiming divinity, and the Pharisees are scandalized by Jesus' claim. And they began to gather stones to throw at Jesus. The Pharisees were not able to actually carry out their plan to kill him because his time had not yet come. And then come words of prophetic significance. Jesus hid himself and left the temple. Jesus hid himself in his humanity. And St. Paul, in his letter to the Philippians, speaks of Jesus emptying himself and taking the form of a slave. In Jesus, a new covenant had been forged in his own blood. This is the new covenant promised by Jeremiah, a covenant not written in stone, but in the human heart. And he left the temple refers to the moment when Jesus died on the cross, and the veil guarding the Holy of Holies in the temple split open, revealing the sacred inner sanctuary to the world. God was no longer there. In other words, he had left the temple. And now he dwells in a new temple, not a building, but a people. the church, the body of the risen Christ. My friends, through baptism, we entered into a covenant with God and God with us. During this Lenten season, we direct our energy toward the renewal of that covenant at Easter. So then, what is it that God is calling us to do today? What remains of these Lenten days, or for that matter, the rest of this year? How do we respond to God's call to personally uphold the covenant still today? Do we have places in our hearts and minds that we have closed to Jesus? What do we believe about Jesus? Have we distanced from him? Or do we continue to believe and trust Jesus? Or do we simply take Jesus for granted? Let us pray today that we continue to remain faithful to our baptismal covenant and open to hearing and responding to God's call in our lives.